Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the heartbreaking story of Bethany Deaton. On the 30th of October 2012, Detective Penny Cole from the Jackson County Sheriff Department received a call to go out to Longview Lake in Missouri. A tan-coloured Ford Windstar was parked near the lake, and inside was the body of a young woman. The woman was in the back right side seat, leaning against the window. Over her head was a white plastic bin bag tightened around her neck with the red tie handles. Next to her were 2 bottles of over-the-counter painkillers. One was completely empty, the other still sealed. There was also a note that read, "My name is Bethany Deaton. I chose this evil thing. I did it because I wouldn't be a real person, and what is the point of living if it is too late for that? I wish I had chosen differently a long time ago. I knew it all and refused to listen. Maybe Jesus will still save me." These were the final written words of 27-year-old Bethany, but in order to dig deeper into the facts surrounding her death, we first need to look at what happened in her life. Bethany was born on the 15th of October 1985, the first child of Carol and Eric Liedlin. She grew up with her 3 younger sisters and younger brother in a devoutly Christian home in Arlington, Texas. Bethany's mother, Carol, was at one point the president of the Arlington Association of Homeschoolers, and all 5 of the children were homeschooled up until their high school years. When Bethany joined high school, she met Terrin O'Brien, who had become one of her closest friends. It would seem that Bethany was universally described in glowing terms. She was kind, caring, intelligent and quiet. She was a gifted writer who ultimately won a scholarship to Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas. During her first year at the university, she met a man by the name of Tyler Deaton. Tyler was also deeply religious and seemed to be passionately pursuing God and a meaningful life as much as Bethany was. She adored Tyler, and whilst they maintained a close friendship, he was not interested in her romantically. The pair soon fell in with a like-minded group of people, and Tyler would regularly lead the group in intense prayer sessions. Notably, Tyler formed a close and intense friendship with Mika Moore, an undergraduate from Houston with whom he shared a love of music, and Bethany introduced Bose Harrington into the group. Tyler was a charismatic young man and soon established himself as the leader of the group. Meanwhile, Bethany remained in awe of Tyler and confided in her friend Terrin that she believed that she had met the love of her life. However, Tyler was going through a very personal struggle. He was experiencing sexual attraction towards men and was desperately trying to repress these feelings and change his sexuality. In the extremely conservative Christian circles in which he was raised, Tyler believed that homosexuality was a choice and that it was something that could be changed and cured. Bethany also held these views and wanted to help heal him. The pair remained close friends during this time, and in December of 2007, Tyler's religious life took a major turn. He went to the Kansas City National Convention that was arranged by the International House of Prayer, who promote around-the-clock access to prayer rooms and centres for Christians to gather and worship. After graduation, Bethany graduated magna cum laude with a BA in English and a minor in Spanish. She, together with Tyler and around 20 other members of their religious group, including Mika Moore and Bose Harrington, moved to Kansas City to study and pray at the International House of Prayer. They lived in 2 separate houses that were split by gender, and at Tyler's suggestion called themselves the Community. Here they would eat together, pray together, and pool their money together from the odd jobs that they held. Tyler ruled the group, thinking of himself as an apostle, explaining this in such a way that it made perfect sense at that time to the other group members. Tyler was clearly very much in charge. He would tell the group what to eat and wear, and even went so far as to control the romantic relationships. They all had to abide by his rules and would be shunned by him if they did not. Communication with outside family and friends was discouraged, and the members became increasingly dependent on one another, and in particular, Tyler. In 2010, Tyler had an epiphany. He believed that he had corrected his sexuality and told Bethany that he now felt attraction to her. After years of waiting for him, Bethany finally began dating Tyler. At the time, others noticed a strange lack of physical affection in their relationship. They appeared more like siblings than boyfriend and girlfriend. Bethany returned to school and began training as a nurse. She qualified in 2012, the same year as her and Tyler got both engaged and married. The wedding took place on the 18th of August 2012, and Bethany seemed radiantly happy. However, Bethany's family and friends found the day uncomfortable and felt excluded from the religious group who made up the wedding party. Despite having concerns, Bethany's mother Carol was happy for her daughter. Even though she didn't see the attraction, she supported her daughter, knowing that she was a smart and capable woman who had always made good decisions. Bethany's high school friend Terrin remembers feeling like her best friend had been lost. Tyler and Bethany went on honeymoon to Costa Rica. Bethany was excited to start this new chapter in her life and was keen to start a family straight away. However, far from being the romantic start to married life that she dreamed of, Bethany was left begging for affection from her new husband. Despite believing that his homosexuality had been cured by prayer, Tyler could not bring himself to consummate the marriage. Bethany took this rejection very personally and struggled to cope with these feelings. When she returned from their honeymoon, she seemed unwell and began talking to a therapist. She moved from the woman's house into Tyler's bedroom in the basement of the men's house. However, Tyler would often sleep elsewhere and she was frequently alone. Tyler would often complain that he needed space and was feeling controlled, and if Bethany tried to discuss their marital issues with him, he would often verbally lash out or publicly shun her. With little contact with her family, Bethany was alone and completely dependent on Tyler and the other members of the community. Less than 6 weeks into their marriage, Bethany was extremely depressed and was briefly admitted to the psychiatric ward at the Truman Medical Center, which was in Lakewood, after reportedly talking about suicide. During her brief stay here, she repeatedly told doctors that she was damned and could not achieve salvation. She was discharged after just 2 days. Tyler did not believe that Bethany was really suicidal. He did not make her family aware of how she had been feeling, claiming that Bethany did not want them to know. On the 29th of October 2012, Tyler, who was now fed up with Bethany's behaviour, held an intense prayer session where he said that members needed to make a choice between the community and their own personal selfishness. Bethany was extremely upset by this. The following day, she left the house and 12 hours later was found dead in the back of her car. When the detectives informed Tyler of his wife's death, he did not respond in a way they would expect from a grieving newlywed. He has since said it was because he was trying to stabilise himself after hearing such tragic news. Bethany's family was shocked that their daughter, who had been radiantly happy at her wedding just a few weeks earlier, had now taken her own life. A service was held in Kansas City on the 6th of November where Tyler spoke about his wife. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled Bethany's death as suicide. On the 9th of November, Bethany's body was transported back to Texas for her funeral and burial. However, shortly before the service was about to start, Bethany's mother received a shocking phone call. The investigators informed her that someone had confessed to Bethany's murder and that they needed her body brought back for an additional autopsy. Bethany's parents then had to make the traumatic decision to proceed with the funeral, but to postpone their daughter's burial. They then issued the following statement: "We are deeply grieving the loss of our beautiful and innocent daughter. We are shocked and horrified by the information now coming forth. The betrayal, subtle and increasing manipulation, and the brutal victimization that occurred is beyond tragic. We pray for the truth to be revealed. While it is important to understand how Bethany died, it is even more important to understand how she lived. Because of the ongoing investigation, we do not have any further comment at this time." Mika Moore, a fellow member of the community with whom Tyler had a close relationship, had been driven to the police station by 2 members of the International House of Prayer and informed officers that Bethany's death had not been a suicide and that he had killed her. On Saturday the 10th of November, he was charged with first-degree murder. The second autopsy led to the cause of death changing from suicide to undetermined. Bethany's body had already been embalmed, which restricted the tests that could be performed. Mika was very reluctant to speak during the police interview, but stated that he had placed the bag over Bethany's head and held it there until she died. This statement matched with the crime scene and was also supported by the fact that Bethany's eyes had been open when the police discovered her body. Had she consumed the tablets before putting the bag on her own head, it would have been likely that she would have become drowsy, meaning her eyes would be likely to be closed. Those who knew Bethany had already questioned the language in the suicide note, with one stating that someone who wrote so beautifully couldn't have written something that inarticulate, leading to some questioning whether it had been written by someone else. However, more shocking information was to come. Mika said that the reason he had killed Bethany was because Tyler had told him to. According to Mika, he and other male members of the community had been drugging Bethany for months using the antipsychotic medication Seroquel. They had been repeatedly sexually abusing her. When Bethany began talking to a therapist after her honeymoon, the men became scared that she would tell the therapist what had been happening. Tyler told Mika to kill Bethany before this could happen. Investigators began to piece together the level of control that Tyler had over the group, which many described was a cult. In turn, this was something that Tyler adamantly denies. He states that although there may have been some influence, all members could use free will. Further investigation uncovered the fact that Tyler was having a sexual relationship with many of the male members of the group, including Mika, in what he referred to as religious experiences. 4 men came forward to state how Tyler used his authority to initiate sexual relationships with men in the group. The International House of Prayer immediately distanced themselves from Tyler, the community, and indeed anything that could be viewed as a cult. Tyler was questioned but not charged with any offence. The case against Mika began to stall. There was no evidence that he had been in Bethany's vehicle, no evidence of drugs in her system, and all the police had was Mika's confession, a confession that was soon recanted. Mika's lawyer held a press conference during which she stated that Mika was innocent and his confession was a fictional account that was bizarre, nonsensical, and most importantly, untrue. It was claimed that Mika made the confession as a result of an exorcism by the leaders of the International House of Prayer, that the confession was a fictional story born from an extremely fragile mental state. Tyler supported this, stating that the confession was spurred on by the House of Prayer control and that they had distanced themselves from the group and effectively sold Mika to the police in order to save their reputation. Mika was released on bail and in January 2013 entered a not guilty plea. Despite extensive investigation, it was not possible to substantiate Mika's confession, and in October 2014, the murder charge against him was dropped just 2 weeks before his trial was due to commence. At around that same time, it was reported that the handwriting on the suicide note was a match for Bethany's, and none of Mika's DNA was found at the scene. So what did actually happen to Bethany? Was it suicide or was it murder? Many people, including Tyler, believe that Bethany took her own life. Many still blame him for her death, though, alleging that he isolated and shunned her to the point where she believed that suicide was her only option. Mika Moore maintains his innocence and believes he was coerced by the International House of Prayer, stating that they are not prophets, they are manipulators. Bethany's mother, Carol, does not believe that Bethany took her own life. She wants justice and the truth for her daughter. Bethany's father, Eric, has made little comment about his daughter's death over the years, but in a rare interview stated that he believes his daughter was severely depressed, that she wasn't cared for or protected, and as a result took her own life. The case remains open. That concludes today's case about Bethany Deaton. Thanks very much to Preska from BC, who suggested that I cover the case. Please add any comments down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thanks very much for listening to the Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. In February 2013, Tyler was employed by a school in Dallas. Just over a month later, he was suspended after his pupils discovered his past on Google. Goodbye.